when I go back to that time, like, I was so broken, it was unreal. So I turned to my best friend, which was alcohol and drugs, and I just went deep into it, you know. And again, I needed to make sure that on the outside, everything looked okay. Hi, my name's Chris. I was the product of two amazing parents who are still amazing, and I'm still blessed to have them in my life. You know, there's nothing particularly remarkable or unremarkable that I would talk about. I think in a lot of ways I kind of had a normal childhood. As an adult man, I would tell you, when I look back from where I am today, I just think I always saw something bigger in my life, and I'm still trying to explore what that is. I think I want to kind of go to the point where, you know, as I grew up, I was never the cool kid. You know, I was taught by my parents, you know, to study hard. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways growing up, I was trying to be a good student, and not through any fault of my parents or what have you. They, you know, were being the best parents they could be. But I think there was a lot of pressure I had always felt, and just to perform and be the best. You know, as time went on, I just know that there were, like, I was very, things had to be a certain way. You know, I remember, like, if one of my toys got broken, like, that was very upsetting to me, you know. I'd need to get a new toy or what have you. Kind of fast forward into being a teenager, I started to just notice these things. Just, I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies. I liked things a certain way. And it got to the point where, too, then I started, like, I needed things very clean and organized, and to a very obsessive point, to where my parents actually started getting concerned. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of knowledge on the subject, but later I was, quote unquote, diagnosed as being obsessive compulsive. And, you know, I'll leave it at some of the thoughts that went through my head were thoughts that I never wanted to share, because my fear was, if I share this stuff, they're going to lock me in a box, put me in a straitjacket and not let me out. Just from a clinical standpoint, OCD is kind of, they consider it an anxiety disorder or what have you. And where that becomes important is, you know, I went through traditional treatment for that, took antidepressants, and the symptoms definitely got better, you know. And I went off to college, and I remember getting to college and being I was very outside my element. You know, I was away from home. I didn't know anybody. It was extremely uncomfortable for me. I'm in this new environment, and I'm like, okay, you know, why am I here? I got to study. I got to do all these things. And I just, you know, if I go back, I just remember all this pressure, just intense pressure. You know, it wasn't before long that I learned that one of the things that was pretty popular when you go to college is drinking. And this is where the story, and part of why I brought the OCD up and the anxiety and what have you, takes a turn. When I was in college, I really realized, like, geez, when I drink this substance, alcohol, like, the anxiety melts away. And I just feel really good. And that, I think, was a turn for me, because, you know, as a freshman in college, you know, my first year, to be blunt, I did terrible. My grades were awful. You know, I was just socializing. That's when I started partying. And, you know, I had this moment, you know, talking with my father after that year, you know, where he just kind of sat me down and was like, that can't continue. And I think when I came back in my sophomore year, my grades definitely started going up. I realized, like, no, I'm here. I got to take this seriously. However, I continued to party. And in the meantime, there were friends back home who I knew, who I there was a part-time job I was working at, guy who I then, called my best friend, who over time introduced me to different things, marijuana, other substances, partying was that was part of what I did, and I started to love to party. I graduate college, I move on, I go and get my first job. And again, I'm thinking like everybody else knows what they want to do, what they want to be, what they want their occupation to be. I just wanted to do something and get to the next party. And my life became a series of doing all the right things so that everybody thought like Chris was doing what he was supposed to do. And he was. But the part that most people, unless you knew me really closely, didn't know was that I was living to have a good time. And, I had many relationships. And again, that one friend that I mentioned, he was encouraging me to do things that probably aren't things that I should do. But, he was my buddy, and you hang with your buddies and you do what your buddies do. It got me into a pattern of, again, as I had said, just living for the party. Here I was, I'm moving through life. One of my friends from college, we had met back up. We started dating. We moved into an apartment together. I was calling her my fiance. There was no ring on her finger. And we did things very much like you see the world doing today. We bought a house together. All the while, I'm partying. And the thing that over this period of time, and this is what I think anybody who truly gets involved with alcohol or any type of substance abuse, at the time, you're not really looking at it like it's substance abuse. It just becomes part of your life. And it's just something you do. Now I'm a new homeowner. The lawn's mowed. The house looks nice. The cars are in the driveway. They're washed. The guy puts on a suit. He gets in his car and he goes to work every day. But as he's working, all he's thinking about is, oh my God, I can't wait to get drunk. I can't wait to get high. And that was my life for many years. It got to a point where the woman who I thought that I was marrying and said was my fiance, I found out she was cheating on me with a guy that she was working with. And very rapidly, the house that we had a year earlier bought together, I realized, like, what is happening? My world's falling apart. And in short order, she was gone. She was no longer in the house. She went on. She married that guy. And I was alone. And when I go back to that time, like, I was so broken. It was unreal. So I turned to my best friend, which was alcohol and drugs, and I just went deep into it, And again, I needed to make sure that on the outside, everything looked okay. There's a stereotype out there that if you're like a drunk or an addict or something, that you live on Skid Row or you drink out of booze out of a paper bag underneath a bridge in a tent. There's addicts and alcoholics probably in your church, in your workplace, in your neighborhood. The depth of the problem so much bigger than you even know. I went to a bar one night, and I think I'd gotten home from work that day. I did my normal routine, which at this point, my drinking had gotten to the point where I pretty much drank every day. If I could drink during the day, I did. I would put alcohol in a giant coffee mug. People thought I was drinking coffee. I was drinking Coca-Cola mixed with rum. Still working, still paying the bills. On the outside, I was doing all the things that the responsible man does. I went to the liquor store that night, went home. I drank, I think, a bottle of scotch and some beers, and then I went to a bar in Westmont. And then after closing the bar at 2 o'clock at night, I was driving home. I think the speed of my car before I crashed was 120 miles an hour. Totaled the car. There was another car merging onto the road, and I drove through a concrete barrier to avoid hitting the car. I'm pretty sure I blacked out. I couldn't even tell you at this point. All I knew is a guy knocked on my window. It's 2:30 in the morning. There just happens to be a guy walking down a road. And I remember I just said, "Do you have a cell phone?" I couldn't find anything. I found out later my cell phone, which was on the seat, had, from the impact, flew up under the dashboard, was literally wedged under the dashboard from the impact. Grabbed his phone, and my brilliant idea was to call AAA to try to get them to come and get my car, which was literally a quarter mile from my house, to get it home before anybody was any the wiser. Instead, 3 police cars showed up, and my night had a different end result. I was breathalyzed and what have you, and even though my level was very high, I was still under the legal limit at that time, and they still charged me with reckless driving and all kinds of other things. And this is where, like, at that point too, and it was also kind of an important point to mention, I was very successful in business at the time in what I was doing. The arrogance afterward was like, this is ridiculous. I need a good lawyer, da-da-da-da. I got a good lawyer. I had to pay a lot of fines and stuff, but I got to keep my driver's license. And guess what I did? I kept doing the exact same thing I had been doing. I went and got a new car, kept partying, kept drinking, you know, and at this point, I want to say after that, you would think a normal person will wake up. To me, it had nothing to do with the activity. And at no point during this did I feel like I was like doing anything wrong. To me, this is what you do. Like, you work hard, you play hard, and you continue that cycle. You know, you're climbing the ladder of life. You need to be successful in business. You need to be successful personally. You need to be successful in your relationships. Material things were very important to me. I remember, like, I had a pretty expensive watch at the time, and, you know, I would get custom made suits, and that's just kind of where my head was at, what was important and what I had come to believe that was important. The crazy thing is, none of this was stuff that my parents ever put in me. You know, I was kind of raised with pretty good values, which I can't say. I don't know where it came from, but that's where that came from. However, as time went on, you know, I want to say past that, it was about another 2.5, 3 years. I was in a new job. I was just my behaviors and the recklessness of the abuse that I was doing to my body, and just literally those around me. Because, like, when you're living for that, you're not paying any attention to your relationships. You know, I remember having a lot of bitterness towards her name was. I had a lot of bitterness towards. And I remember when I finally had a reckoning moment, and I was like, I would have left me too, you know. And, you know, not to say that she didn't have a part to play in things, but it wasn't about her, you know. And these are the kind of things that I only learned over time, you know. I did end up in a 12-step group. The group that I got involved with was very welcoming to me. And they showed me a way that I could get sober. And, you know, for 6 months after that first group that I spent time with, you know, what I had been doing to what I was doing then came from, like, complete maniac down to what some people might call, like, normal drinking. Of course, I was lying to these people too and telling them that I was sober and everything. And then I had a final moment where I was working at a company. I had gotten a new job, and we had an event in Atlantic City, and the guy next to me who I worked with, we were at a company banquet, and I looked over and he was raging drunk. And I had a moment, which today I can only attribute to God. And mind you, I didn't know God then. I didn't know God at all. I looked at this guy and I said, if I keep going, I'm going to be like him and I'm going to be out of a job. Because I know where this leads. I pushed the drink away that was in front of me. And the next day I was with this group, and I put my hand up and I just said, you know what? I need help. And that was my surrender moment, it's been over 18 years since that last drink. I got involved with these people, and they taught me a new way to live. It was about serving others. It was about not drinking one day at a time. And for my purposes, that meant not drugging, not anything. It was like, we're not doing that anymore. And I would go to these meetings and I would meet people, and there was, I had people in my life who would give me direction, and there was literature and things that I would read. And one day at a time, I just started putting days of sobriety together. I was about 5.5 years in. I woke up one morning, and I remember thinking, if this is all there is, I'm going to go get drunk. And up to that point, I had been in service. I was helping other people who were struggling with addiction and alcoholism, going to meetings on a daily basis. And that day happened to be what I now know today is Easter. Now, of course, I knew what Easter was, but Easter had no particular significance to me. I wasn't a guy who grew up going to church. As a kid, I could probably count on one hand how many times I've been in church. I probably had opened a Bible on my own once, maybe in high school as part of a class. I really had no knowledge of God. I remember at one point I would have branded myself an atheist, at another point an agnostic. When I had gotten involved in this group and, started getting sober, they kept talking about finding, having what they called a higher power. And so I did go on what I called kind of trying to find a spiritual entity or whatever in my life. And I was reading Eastern meditations. I was reading about Buddha. I read spiritual books. And there was a lot of really awesome wisdom in those books and stuff. But for me, at least, there was something there was something missing. Like something was lacking. Like I can't, other than to put it that way, I don't know how else to put it. So we come to this morning and there's just this deflation. Like, what am I doing? I'm just kind of now living life and I'm sober. But if this is it, like, is this it? And to this day, I can't tell you how it happened, but I ended up in this church on Easter morning, and I show up and I have a suit on, and everybody's wearing jeans and T-shirts. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, aren't I at church? And I was warmly welcomed, and what we often call in the church is the altar call. The pastor makes an invitation to the Lord. I accepted that invitation, and they had a room where they said at the end, hey, if you accepted Christ today, we'd like you to come in this room. We just want to talk to you briefly. We have a gift for you, blah, 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 blah. Something changed that day. And it started to ensue slowly. I was continuing to go to meetings and what have you, but something definitely penetrated into me. And today I know from hindsight, that it was, I finally met up with the Holy Spirit. What was always missing that I couldn't find in the spiritual books and all this, and that morning when I woke up on Easter, which we call Resurrection Sunday, it was like it was my personal resurrection. I had been resurrected, but now I was really brought to life as a new creation in Christ. And, still messed up, still stained, still dirty from the world. In fact, you know, I was serving at that, I got involved in service at that church, and ran a ministry there and loved doing it. And then on the outside, I got involved in a relationship with somebody who I 100% shouldn't have gotten involved with. And I remember one day where I guess the Spirit really convicted me, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I can't be in this relationship. This is wrong. And I went to the leadership at that church to confess my sin, because I didn't know what else to do. You know, I was new to all this. I mean, at that point, I'd been coming around maybe 2 years. And again, still learning about the Bible, still learning about Jesus. And what I was met with, I don't even know how to explain it, but it was almost like, oh, you can't be here now. Nobody said it to me that way, but it was like I became a hot potato, and they were trying to figure out, what do I, you know, he confessed sin. What do we do with him? And I ended up leaving that church. And I was so lost. I was praying, you know, I remember always hearing this, we call it having a personal relationship with God. I'm very, I want to say in a lot of ways, I'm very logical and scientific at the core. As much as I'm a very creative person, I'm about logic and what makes sense and facts and figures. And I would hear that term, having a personal relationship with Jesus. I never understood what that meant. It didn't make any sense to me. Look, I can't see God. I can't touch him. I can't smell him. Like, I don't understand what you mean, have a personal relationship. And here I am in this moment, and I'm praying to a God who I can't see, can't touch, can't smell, can't feel. And I'm like, what do I do now? And when you pass by Kingsway Church on Chapel Avenue, all you kind of see is the brick side of the building and not much else. At the time, there were these plastic blue chairs there. And I remember on my travels from the other direction past, I would always see these blue chairs. And I literally thought, those chairs are stupid. I didn't get them. Like, what is with these chairs? Well, that morning when I was praying, and I hadn't been then in church for 2 weeks, and I'm like, I got to find a church or something. Literally, I heard God tell me, he goes, how about you go to the place with the plastic blue chairs? And it's interesting that, you know, again, none of this really made that much sense to me then, as far as now in my faith walk, you know, and coming forward all these years. It's just hilarious to me, because it's just like, God has a sense of humor. You know, he really has a sense of humor. You know, to me today, my personal relationship with my Lord Jesus Christ is, you know, it's like having a relationship with your earthly father, yet he's not your earthly father, but I talk to him like he is, and I reach out to him like he is, because that's my personal relationship with him, you know. And I still remember that. And I came in, and I was so warmly welcomed here. And, you know, I can't believe I think we're going 11-ish years now here at Kingsway, and just how my faith has grown by leaps and bounds. You know, when I came in, again, something, guy who had sponsored me years ago, you know, as a guide with the alcohol and everything, he said, part of his story, he said, when he came in to that fellowship of people, that he came in not broke, but a broken man. And I could always relate to that, because that really resonated with me personally. You know, when I came into that program, when I came into the church, my initial dealing with church versus what it is today, there was a lot of brokenness. There's still brokenness in my life. You know, I look at it as like, you know, that the clay pot that broke, and then putting all the pieces together, it looks like a clay pot, but you can see all the cracks in it, you know. At least my cracks are fairly evident to me, and I'm sure some people who know me well, they're evident to them as well. But, you know, when I look at just how I've come to this day, it just blows my mind, you know. So here I am, At the time, Pastor Brian was our senior pastor, and I remember I was like, I got to talk to the pastor here. I got to confess to him what I was trying to confess at the other church. And I did. And he made me feel like a human being, And, he said to me that day, he said, you don't ever need to talk to anybody about this. You've confessed it. You've confessed it to me. You've confessed it to the Lord. And I don't want to say, again, we're not a Catholic church or anything. I don't want to call it like I was absolved of anything, but there was such a peace and a freedom in that moment, and I'd asked him just for some guidance in my walk, because I realized it was time to really start to get to know who God was, which meant getting into the Bible. And I really didn't know where to start. Had I read the Bible? Yes, but it was more about coming to church and listening to the sermon and serving and being around church people, which was good. That was all excellent stuff. But, kind of where I want to pivot at this point is talking to you as a guy now who's been on this walk with the Lord for a while, and some of the amazing things that I've seen the Lord do. I mean, first off, just him moving me from I have to drink, I have to party, to in like 2 weeks, you're going to end up in this fellowship where they're going to help you with not drinking, which was never a desire of mine at all. Hand of God. Fast forward. Coming into a church just where like you get there because of plastic blue chairs. Hand of God. It seems stupid. It may seem funny. To me, it's like, again, I just love the sense of humor of God. I'm out doing street ministry with two friends, one who still goes to Kingsway, one who goes to my former church. We were in Philadelphia. I was limping. My friend from Kingsway, guess I can say his name, Peter, says, "Why are you limping?" I tell him the story. So that, my ankle had been broken. I found out later that when I had my construction company that I dropped something on it and then it got re-broke. I was told that I needed an ankle replacement, that the ankle was shot, needed to be replaced by a mechanical ankle. Peter and Dan prayed over my ankle, of all places in Love Park, 10 feet from the Love Park statue, and literally are both feeling heat pouring out of my ankle. And fast forward, I'm noticing less pain, what have you. Now we're going to really fast forward, time period of almost 7 years. I'm testifying that my ankle has been healed. I have no scientific proof that it's been healed, other than at this point, I started getting very involved physically in the gym, doing Spartan race. No pain. I'm doing all these things, pounding on the ankle. It's not breaking, nothing. The pandemic hits. I'm going out. I can't go to a gym. I'm running anywhere from 10 to 30 miles a day. And I basically was getting just stress and all the ligaments and stuff. I didn't know that. I go to urgent care. They x-ray everything. The doctor comes back in and I say to him, I'm looking at him. He's telling me, oh yeah, just ice, rest. You'll be good. And I'm looking at him. He's like, what? I said, Doc, you took an x-ray. What's on the x-ray? He's like, there's no sign your ankle was ever broken. All the hair stands up on my back. Hand of God. True miraculous healing. One of the things that I testify about, it's part of my story, that when I'm talking to non-believers and believers alike, God can heal you. He can heal you from broken bones. He can heal you from what we call mental illness. He can heal you from alcoholism and drug addiction. He can heal you from relational problems. He built you, so he knows how you're made. He's proven it in my own life. And I can also say to you at this point, I'm still the most imperfect, broken person in so many ways, but I've also really been remade and refashioned by the Lord Jesus Christ. Even in those moments of intense anxiety, right now I have kind of like, we talk about it all the time. We sing it in the songs, like, the storm's raging around me. Some days you wouldn't know it by what comes out of my mouth, but there's a peace right now. Like, I just know, like, he's taking care of me, you know? And it's always when you look back at the story too, like, it's a miracle that I'm telling you this story. It's a miracle that I'm telling you that I'm sober today. It's a miracle that I'm in church. I didn't go so far as to tell you that I hated Christians, but I did. I hated them. I thought they were hypocritical, pompous people who pointed fingers at other people. And we're like, ooh, they're not like us. We don't want them here. You know, the further we get away from who we are, I think sometimes we forget who we are, who we were, and who we are today. You know, if somebody comes into the church and they're broken and they're broke and maybe they're homeless and whatever, are we welcoming them the same way that we would welcome the person who's wearing the finest clothing, the nicest watch, has the coolest swag on, the expensive $300 sneakers and stuff? Or are we staying away from them because they're not like us? You know, we are called to love people.
What would you like to tell the person on the other side of the screen watching this who perhaps is going through what you went through?
If you're listening to this, just know this. You're listening to this and watching this for a reason. And my belief is that the Lord put you right where you're at right now, specifically for that reason. There's a story in the Bible about the Roman soldier, and his servant's ill. And he approaches Jesus and he asks the Lord to heal his servant. And he tells him, you don't need to go see him. You don't need to go to my house. I'm not even worthy of that. I just trust that you'll do it. That's me paraphrasing it, obviously. And Jesus is amazed by his level of faith. You need to have faith that God really does have you. And if you have that inkling of faith and, you know, that mustard seed of faith, and you're willing to speak it out with your mouth to the Lord, he's going to hear you. And he is going to act. And whether you believe it or not, he's already acting on your behalf. Because I already said, you're watching this because he knew you needed to be seeing it right here and now. He designed you. He built you. He formed you before you even were a thing to be formed. And I think I had mentioned it earlier, you know, the architect has all the plans and knows how it all works together. So even if we mess it up and stink it up and mess ourselves all up, he can put it back together like that. He can repair an ankle. He can repair a relationship. He can repair anything. Now, I think the thing that I've come to learn through faith and everything too is it's always for his good and his glory. But again, he loves his kids, you know, he's not going to give you a snake. He's going to give you something good. And, I think it just boils down to just really having that faith and knowing that everything is on purpose and for a purpose. And the best is yet to come. That's where I would leave it.